Welcome to another edition of the Sports Philosopher's Rant. Today we're going to be talking about some more college football news, primarily the way too early to tell poll for next season. I'm going to be referencing an article by CBS Sports that's given their preseason top 25 list here. I'll just go over the list. I'll link it in the description as well in case you want to look at it for yourself. Go over the list and I'll give some thoughts about it. Let's see, number 25 is North Carolina. And they got at number 24, they have Arizona State. 23 would be Baylor. Then they have UCF at 22, Iowa at 21, Boise State there at 20. Moving inside of that, you got Memphis at 19, Cincinnati at 18. Texas comes in at 17. Then they have Louisville at 16. Then you got Wisconsin at 15 with Michigan at 14. Moving up then into number 13 is Texas A&M, followed by Penn State at 12, then Minnesota at 11. And for the top 10, you got Notre Dame, and then Georgia at number 9. Auburn comes in at 8, and then the Oregon Ducks at 7. Florida gets number 6, and then your top 5 is going to be Oklahoma at 5, LSU at 4, Alabama at 3, Ohio State at 2, and then Clemson at number 1. A few interesting ones that stand out here. Well, first of all, you got Baylor there at 23. With Matt Rule leaving for the NFL, that's going to be interesting to see how they respond to that. They just hired Dave Aranda from LSU, the longtime defensive coordinator there, to replace him. Aranda's not been a head coach before. We don't really know how that's going to work out, but he's a very well-respected defensive coordinator. He's done great things there, so should be able to do good as long as he can make some really good key hires, especially at offensive coordinator. So let's see, UCF and Iowa. I mean, Iowa is pretty much always right around this position. That doesn't really surprise me one way or the other. Memphis there at 19. It will be interesting to see what they do without Mike Norvell, who went to Florida State, and I'll talk more about that here in a few minutes when we get talking about the ACC in general to see what I think about that. Without him, I mean, it was a pretty big loss. It's going to be hard to see them maintaining the same level of play that they had, but we'll see what they can do without him. Cincinnati still has Luke Fickell, and this is one of those guys that I really think is probably going to end up being not maybe number 1 on the coaching wish list next year, but he's definitely making a pretty good case for rising up the rank there. He has had back-to-back 11-win seasons at Cincinnati, and he didn't exactly hire a very strong program when he took over there. So look for him to probably be one of the hot names to move up next year unless he has just an absolute disastrous season, which it's not looking like he's going to. Texas at number 17. Oh, Texas. There we go. That is a program that looks like it is do-or-die time for Tom Herman. He was very close to losing his job this year, but I think he was saved for several reasons. One, he had a whole bunch of injuries this season, and he did replace a lot of coaches. So, I mean, there is a chance that he comes back strong next year, but, I mean, if he's got to do it fast because those fans are not very patient at all. Wisconsin, right around where we'd probably think they'd be at 15. I mean, maybe between 10 and 15 you can make a case for them. Michigan, that's another one. It just seems like they cannot break out of the hump of 8 or 9 wins. It seems like no matter what, that Harbaugh always loses to Ohio State, struggles with Michigan State, even though he did look for a while this year like he'd really kind of gotten over that hump, but it's becoming obvious that he's just not getting it done, especially in the really big games. So I don't know how much longer they're going to put up with him, and they kind of feel like they're in a state of limbo, I think, they're in Ann Arbor, because if they do get rid of him, who in the world are they going to get? So it's just not a very good situation to be in general there for them. Texas A&M, you could say very similar things there for Jimbo Fisher. Granted, he's only been there 2 years, and he did have an extremely hard schedule this year. So in fairness there, I mean, it was not the easiest situation right now. His recruiting has been pretty good, but I mean, when you're paying a coach a guaranteed 10-year contract worth $75 million, I mean, that's not a good situation for them to be in if he doesn't turn it around quickly here. I mean, you have to expect $75 million results when you're paying that, I mean, regardless of what the situation is. So I definitely think that he's going to be feeling the heat this year. I mean, it would be ridiculous to even consider the fact that if they do make a move, they'd owe him $60 million to go away. That's just not to coach, basically. So that's just mind-boggling to hear that kind of number thrown around. But at the same time, when you're paying that kind of money, you have to expect top-notch results. Penn State there at 12. I mean, not a whole lot to say there. I mean, a lot of people were thinking James Franklin might be a candidate for those other jobs, like Florida State in particular, and also possibly USC, which did not open up, and I don't really understand completely how it didn't, quite frankly. But aside from that, you got to expect that they're probably going to do good. So I think that's a pretty good spot. Minnesota, that's probably going to be the one program that has the hottest coach in all the country there with P.J. Fleck, the incredible season he just had. Surprising somewhat that they kept him, but you got to imagine next season he's going to be unless Urban Meyer or Bob Stoops or someone like that comes back into the picture, that P.J. Fleck will definitely be right at the top of any coaching wish list for any of these programs making a change. Number 10, Notre Dame. Yeah, I think this is probably a good place for them to be. I mean, people rag on them a lot, and yes, they do seem to constantly be overrated, but at the same time, Brian Kelly does win a lot of games. He's more on the quiet side of sustained success, so it's kind of hard to really say they belong anywhere lower than that. It doesn't quite feel like they're that top-notch team, but their results have put them right there. Georgia at 9. I know some people want to think that because of their recruiting they belong a little bit higher than that, but they are losing a lot of players. They're having to replace virtually their entire offensive line. They're also losing their longtime quarterback, Jake Fromm, and DeAndre Swift is also going to the NFL. They also lost their offensive line coach, Pittman, to Arkansas, who took that job to be the head coach there, and he was known to be a very good recruiter. He's also one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. So, I mean, I can see a lot of – I'm kind of skeptical on how good this Georgia team's going to be. And also they get a much stronger schedule this year too, because they have to go to Tuscaloosa. They have Florida that's getting better and better every year, it seems like, under Dan Mullen. Tennessee's even starting to turn it around a little bit, and it looks like they're probably going to be sooner than later possibly a dark horse type of candidate in the SEC East. So, I mean, I could really see Georgia probably taking a step back this year and probably not going to be in Atlanta for the SEC East. I mean, they might surprise. I mean, they are still recruiting at a really high level, but they're just replacing a lot. So there's definite reason for some skepticism with them. Auburn, as we get them, this very similarly to Georgia, they lose basically their entire defense. They lose all of their offensive linemen. Yeah, they do bring back their freshman quarterback, Bo Nix, but I mean, this is just Gus Malzahn, what can you say about this guy? It seems like every single year that he takes a step forward, he follows it up by taking a giant step backwards the following year. And this year he's got all those tough games on the road like Georgia and Alabama, even though he did have a very hard schedule last season too. And they, for the most part, played pretty good aside from their offensive struggles. But, I mean, I could see them probably struggling next year. We'll see what happens for sure. I mean, And if there's ever been a coach out there that always seems to do just enough not to get fired, it's Gus Malzahn. It seems like every single year he wins just enough games to keep his job. And, I mean, I talk to Auburn fans all the time at work especially, and the consensus amongst them is he cannot get out of town fast enough. I mean, they do not like him at all. Some of them never wanted him even in the first place. A lot of them are wishing they could hire P.J. Fleck right now and just be done with it. But, I mean, again, a really high buyout's keeping him there for right now. So we'll see how Auburn does this year, even though it's not – I don't think it's probably going to be one of their better seasons personally. Number 7, they have Oregon. If any team on this list I'm not sure I agree with, I think it's this one. I think they might actually belong a little bit higher. Mario Cristobal has done a fantastic job of rebuilding this Oregon program and getting some elite recruits in there, and he really had a really strong season here. A lot of people that are Alabama fans, the talk around town is that Mario Cristobal, because of his success here at Oregon, is rising up their wish list of potential coaches to replace Coach Saban when he eventually retires. Who knows when that'll be. But there's a lot of good reason for that. Cristobal even when he was an assistant in Alabama, he was an extremely elite recruiter, and he's keeping that going in in spades there in Oregon. He's also winning big time there, winning Pac-12 championships and things of that nature. So if he maintains that, look out for him to be a very sought-after coach for Alabama when Coach Saban inevitably retires eventually. But if anything, I think they could probably flip Oregon and Oklahoma around, or maybe Oregon and Florida around, or something like that. But anyway, Florida, I mean, already talked about them. Mullen seems to have a really good thing going there in Gainesville. See how much longer he can keep it going there. I mean, he might need to get just slightly more talent there in his recruiting, but I mean, he's doing pretty good there. His coaching has never been in question. He always seems to do a great job year in and year out, so I think that's a pretty good spot for them at 6. Oklahoma at 5, I think, is a little bit too high. They lose a lot. This is the first time that Lincoln Riley's really going to have to deal with his own quarterback recruits and not get one of these transfer quarterbacks that come in there and are just one and done it to the NFL, it seems like. But I still think they're going to be good because I don't think the Big 12 is all that strong of a conference, but I don't think they're going to be as top-notch this year as they have been in the past. I look for them to be more like maybe a number 8, number 9, number 10 type of team than a top 5 team. LSU, I mean, we've already said in yesterday's video and then a little bit earlier today, they are losing a lot of good coaches. They're losing a lot of good players. That being said, as the defending champions, I mean, they are up there until someone knocks them off. I don't see them repeating. I think it's going to be. I think their losses are just too much, especially with losing Burrow and his offensive guru there and Dave Aranda. I think that's just too much to replace. But I mean, it's still the SEC West. I don't really see anybody other than maybe Alabama being better than them right away. So I think this is probably a pretty fair spot for them. Maybe a couple spots lower, but not far below. Alabama, they have at number 3 now. Personally, I think this is a pretty fair ranking here. I mean, maybe you could argue number 2. I definitely don't think number 1, but number 3 is a pretty good spot. I mean, yes, they lose Tua and they lose Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy, but they do return Devontae Smith and Najee Harris is also coming back, and then Dylan Moses is coming back, which was kind of a surprise there because he probably could have made it in the late first round if he'd gone. And then they also have Josh McMillan back. So defensively, just by injury luck alone, assuming these guys stay healthy, they should be improved just because of who comes back that was injured last year. Also, unlike years past, they haven't had much coaching turnover at all up to this point. So as long as they can keep that going, it's really hard to say they're going to drop off much. I mean, they have Georgia on the schedule this year and LSU being LSU. But, I mean, like I said, LSU's losses are a lot heavier than Alabama's right now. Mac Jones looked pretty good by season's end. I mean, he had a couple bad throws against Auburn, but more than not, he played good enough to win that game. It was the defensive issues that mostly cost him that one. So I think this is a pretty good spot there. Ohio State, I mean, give credit where credit's due on Ohio State. I usually feel like they're one of the most overrated teams in the country that just sits there and plays a very weak schedule and then just kind of gets into the playoffs by default or gets in the conversation without really beating anybody marquee. But this year's team had a totally different look. I expected when Urban Meyer left that they were really going to drop off quickly, but no. Ryan Day kept the program going strong. I would say stronger even than it had been. So credit goes to them. I mean, I did live in Ohio for 6 years in grad school and things like that. So, I mean, a lot of my friends like Ohio State, and I was kind of pulling for them, honestly, there for a little bit in the playoffs. But if he can keep it going, and he does return a pretty good group next year, so it's hard to say that they're going to really drop off or anything like that. So I agree with this ranking. Clemson, Dabo and his voodoo just continues to keep it rolling, unfortunately. It seems like he must have incriminating information on all these coaches to keep them there. And today, Travis Etienne remarkably announces that he's coming back to school, which I don't know why in the world a running back that is a potential top 2 or even top 3 running back would ever come back. I was kind of surprised that Najee Harris did, too, to be honest. It's just, I don't know how Dabo continues to not lose more assistant coaches than he does. It is mind-blowing because it seems like Coach Saban has coaching turnover almost on an annual basis. And, I mean, you can argue that some of that's because of personality, because Saban's never been known as an easy person to work for, no doubt. But it's just, How Brent Venables, for instance, hasn't been hired away. I will never understand that one. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But those are my thoughts about the too early top 25. I think for the most part this list is pretty good. There are a couple question marks on there, but I mean, this is obviously we're not even done with spring camp or haven't even begun it or anything like that. So this is a pretty fair list here. I'll put the link in the description for it, and that's going to do it for this episode today. I might have another one out tonight or tomorrow dealing with an unrelated topic. I've been having a lot of strong opinions lately about the direction of Star Wars and things like that, so I'm probably going to do a video about that here in the next day or so. So look forward to that, and you all have a great weekend.